Health Ahead provides educational, cutting-edge information from leading professionals in integrated healthcare. This evening, our guest speaker is Michael Tsarion. He is the founder and developer of archetypal taroscopic astrology systems. He's going to enlighten us on the science of metaphysical arts. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, you were born in London, but you grew up in Northern Ireland, in Belfast.
That's correct.
And you come from a family of clairvoyant and philosophers in archetypal systems and numerology.
That's correct. My grandfather is Tara Singh, who heads the Foundation for Life Action in Los Angeles. He's a renowned philosopher, and he specializes today in the Course in Miracles. He's written several volumes.
Course in Miracles.
Yes, it's a fantastic theosophical work on the soul. My mother was an internationally recognized seer and clairvoyant, starting in Ireland, but then we ended up in America by my grandfather's foundation, his non-profit foundation. And he was involved in the early days with Krishnamurti Society and the wonderful organization that Krishnamurti put together in India, and later on became affiliated with Paul Solomon. And that's one of the reasons why we ended up in the States.
So Paul Solomon and your mother and Tara Singh were encouraging you to get involved in the system of the metaphysical arts?
Yes, very much so. In fact, when you grow up in a pedigree like that, you're in a way, there's sort of pressure on you to not just follow what other people are saying, but to try and find your own unique expression. So you are under a certain amount of pressure to find your own niche, to bring something of your own expression to the metaphysical arts.
When did you start working in the work of numerology and tarot?
Actually, that's started in Belfast, where I grew up. My mother, being well connected from her own work, she decided to actually invite some leading teachers and mystics and free thinkers to Ireland, to Belfast, because of the terrible consciousness problems that do exist there. In fact, unfortunately, still continue to exist there. And this was to help alleviate that. So she made contact with people like Eileen Caddy from the Findhorn organization, Sir George Trevelyan from the Rican Trust, Barbara Marx Hubbard, Jerry Jampolsky, Shirley MacLaine, and we were able to host a good number of these academes and metaphysical alumni. But one of the people that she was affiliated with for a great period of time, and someone I consider a great mentor, was Paul Solomon, the Reverend Paul Solomon. And his organization was called the Inner Light Fellowship, Fellowship of Inner Light Movement, in Virginia Beach, which is now called the Paul Solomon Foundation. Sadly, he's passed away. But one of the people that he sent to Ireland, to these circles that we were hosting, was a woman, and she brought with her actually a tarot deck. I believe it was one of the Italian tarocchi decks. And she led us through some meditations with the deck and give us readings and all sorts of things. And I can tell you that some real magic happened for me. I was about 11 years of age at the time. And then in readings from her, and then subsequent readings I had from other really good tarot people, they were saying that I would have some role in the tarot specifically, which now I was not clued into what that meant at all at that age. But it seemed to happen that as I grew up, my expression was very much within the esoteric and divination arts and centering on the tarot. But as I say, some real magic happened for me in those days when this lady was there with the deck. I realized that it's a valuable empowerment tool. And then, later came the mission, which is the mission that my guides have basically asked me to do, is to bring tarot into the lives of others.
But you also do numerology and astrology.
Oh yes, they're all connected. In fact, in the ancient days, but prior to the Industrial Revolution and even way back into Egypt, numerology, tarot, Kabbalah and astrology were all taught as one subject. There was no differentiation at all between those arts as there is today. And my work is a gestalt. It's a synthesis, bringing all of these together, explaining the glue that holds them all together, because there is one.
Can you share some of the history about the tarot? Where did it come from? How did it start?
Well,
how long time has it been around?
Many thousands of years, many millennium. It stretches right back to the dawn of the sidereal period in Egypt, which is a period that can easily go back to 25,000 years, many millennia BC. And an average deck, for those who are not familiar with it, is a very pictorialized, aesthetically beautiful, sometimes exquisitely designed deck of 78 cards. People who never even want to get into the divination aspect of tarot have been fascinated by the amount of symbolism and art that's involved in it. But the word tarot is a very has a lot of meaning. The word tarot, T-A-R-O-T, is primordial about 10,000 years ago, or 25,000 years ago. The original mother goddess in Egypt was called Tarut.
Tarot.
So the word has hardly changed much, Tarut. And then later, as the dynasties and the cults changed, she becomes known by a plethora of different names. For instance, she became known as Nuth, this famous goddess in Egypt in the early dynasties. Then Mat, Hathor, Ishtar, Isis. Moving in more to the modern, not modern, but Christian eras, she became known as Sophia, Circe in the Greek traditions, and then finally in the Christian era, she became known as Mary, the Madonna, Mara, the great ocean, Mary, the Madonna. But the original Madonna was in Egypt was known as Tarut. And if someone actually does look at a tarot deck and goes through the cards, you'll notice that this feminine goddess image appears with a lot of frequency. And that's because the name of the tarot is actually a feminine goddess name. And then later on in the Anglo-Saxon period, the word tarot, Tarut, it was actually pronounced with a soft H at the end, Taruth, from which we get the word truth.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
It is very interesting, because in fact that implies that the word truth and tarot are exactly the same word.
They're linked.
Right, and I like to bring out the fact that then if you're seeking truth, seek out the tarot, because it's an avenue to finding truth. But on a more basic level, the word tarot is connected to giving counsel, to actually giving a reading.
So is there a clear therapeutic connotation in receiving a reading, would you think?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, a good ethical reading, as long as it's given by somebody of ethics and integrity, it can help you get in touch with what we call the wisdom body. Now, this wisdom body is a living oracle within us. Some people call it intuition, other people call it the God force. Some say it's communion with your guardian angel. Even atheists will refer to it as the instincts. But at least they're talking about something. They're not denying that there is something within us, even though they give it the word instinct. But no matter what you call it, this living oracle is specific within each of us, and we need to get in touch with it. And long before the modern psychologists and priests, society always had its seers, it always had its shamans, and it had its elders. And there were, throughout the Orient and the West, even the great female divination oracles, the keepers of the high arts of divination. And this was being ignored today, unfortunately, this wisdom body, with our persona-driven extrovert lifestyles. Yeah,
and women, specifically before the burning times, were the carriers of wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the reasons why a lot of these people were put to the sword was to expurge the divination arts wholesale throughout the whole of Europe.
Dispel them.
Yes, because if you can be divorced from your wisdom body, then other people can have control over your mind and your consciousness.
So what types of people come to see you for reading? Who are the people?
A vast variety from all walks of life will come, but mostly people who are interested in getting direction and clarity, empowerment in their life, who want to reorientate themselves physically, materially even, emotionally, and occasionally spiritually, on all levels, relationship questions. The tarot will deal with all levels. And people are starting to realize that we play innumerable roles in life. There's more roles. The average person plays more roles than ever was done before in life. And this consumes a great deal of energy. And if we make a wrong decision at a wrong time, it consumes even more energy. And that's what we call waste. And when you put the ego in charge of your life and your destiny, your life is going to be full of waste. Wasting of chances, wasting of resources, wasting of energy. And the world is getting more and more complex every day, so we need to get in touch with something that we can rely on to give us the important information, to redirect us. Now, this inner voice, obviously does talk to us all the time. We know that it talks to us in dreams, but in the dream state the message is incoherent. By using a methodology like a tarot or astrology, that wisdom body, you can almost be in direct contact with it, and this is a very profound thing. And also just it brings magic back into our lives. These are one of the magical sciences, and by studying tarot or taking readings, it puts a bit of magic back into your everyday life. And I think of it as a therapeutic tool, because physical illnesses is a symptom of what goes on in our minds. So if you take care of what's happening in the consciousness, you might have to take care of your body a lot less.
So you really believe that you can get specific answers from a reading? Or
Unquestionably.
Do businessmen come to see you?
Absolutely,
Housewives?
yeah. Nurses, teachers, CEOs, executives. My mother, as a clairvoyant, saw all of the alumni, all of the famous, stars and names and academes, and some people who are not in the public limelight but equally famous. Absolutely, everybody benefits. Everybody has a private life, and everybody has questions and problems that they need to address, and this has been one of the age-old ways of dealing with that.
What is the highest thing which is transmitted during a reading for a client?
Well, that's a good question. There's several things, depending on their question, but I feel that the most important thing that is communicated in a reading is the shedding of disempowerment. Our lives are filled with disempowerment and the waste.
Absolutely.
So that is one thing that you really get clued in on, is how to get rid of that, how to see your road. We already ask other people 70% of our questions. This is why we have a hit or miss accuracy in life. But the other important thing is, again, the idea of roles. We discover in a reading that we're not just the roles that we assume in life. Beyond all the other information and learning which we involve ourselves in, there's the greater need to know who exactly we are, where we're heading, and how to live our lives intimately and authentically. And I think of the tarot, in a way, or divination methods, as like, if you imagine life as a complex jigsaw of many more than 5,000 pieces, but the difference is, if I was to show you the lid of the box, even if it's just for a few seconds, you are going to be able to put the pieces of your jigsaw together faster, with more efficiency, than somebody who has not seen the lid of the box. So involvement in divination, getting readings, even on a very practical level, helps you to see the lid of the box, the big picture, which makes a great deal of difference when you're actually trying to put the pieces together in your life. So I would say that's gives you a glimpse of the cover, in a way.
Now, most people wouldn't consider to receive a tarot reading as a healing tool. What do you have to share with us about that?
Well, I'm convinced that it is, and that's why, this show is something I wanted to be on, because it is connected to health. The French philosopher Voltaire, he said that man will cease to commit absurdities. Man will cease to commit atrocities when he ceases to believe absurdities. So again, I believe that the most pernicious conflicts arise from the uncertainty in our life. No one is going to deny that from morning to night there's uncertainty. Uncertainty as to where we're going, uncertainty as to the roles of other people in our lives, and so on. And if you make the wrong move, there can be guilt, self-recrimination, anger, hostility, often directed towards yourself, And let's take another couple of examples. What happens if I contravene the boundaries of a certain person in my life, and I hurt that person's feelings, or I pick them up wrongly? Suddenly I've made an enemy as opposed to a friend. That's disempowerment. If I spend my life working for somebody else, all the years of my life, that qualifies as disempowerment. If I'm not able to express the religious beliefs, or if I'm not able to dress the way I want to, hang out with the people I want to, there's various forms of disempowerment. If I'm in a relationship setting and I'm not allowed to make the decisions, you can bet that's a disempowerment situation. So our lives are filled with this. And the science and psychologies of the world are pretty good at, they deal with the patch-up job after the damage has been done. But they're not so interested in the actual preventative methods. And look at children. Look at the disempowerment in their lives. They're taught from day one to seek perfection and excellence in everything they do. And what this really boils down to meaning is just the meaningless repetition of facts, the constant memorization of facts. We're not going to get excellence and perfection by just using the left brain. So divination is to harmonize the right and the left hemispheres of the brain.
Now you call yourself also a divination of sacred symbolism. You're a scholar of sacred symbolism, and you teach at the New Age Academy in Berkeley. The children, teach them about sacred symbolism.
Absolutely.
How does sacred symbolism and children, what does that have in common?
Well, ultimately, children's minds, when you're born, your mind works with a perfect harmony of left and right brain. And tarot, we go even into the tarot and into astrology, and the kids are fascinated with this stuff, because tarot is just one chapter out of the greater book of symbolism. And Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and Marcia Eliade and so many other people, Krishnamurti, for instance, whose tradition I grew up in, very much insist that we have to start at the grassroots level. Deal with symbolism in children, helps to balance their minds. You don't have to look at everything in a linear, rationalistic way. That's necessary, but there's also the imagination body, the wisdom body within us. So this introduction, ultimately the God force speaks to us in symbols. So if you're not symbol literate, which unfortunately in America is one of the worst offenders in studying of symbolism, even though there have been some leading lights in the subject, if you don't know symbolism, if you're not literate in symbolism, then you're not hearing what your guides or what the God force is talking to you about. It's as simple as that.
And symbols used continuously in churches and
everywhere.
Yeah.
Every aspect of our lives, we dream in symbols. But the tarot deck, particularly, is a very specific, chapter on symbolism, and people need to get in touch with it.
Now, there are people who feel that there's something sinister about the divinations, or people who come from an orthodox background. What would you like to share with those people?
Yeah, this has come up a lot, and I also, my mother before me, and I, and many other people who do divination, we have a lot of clients who come from the Judeo-Christian mindset, or from the background, or from the faith, and they have pretty much the same kind of question. After they've had a good reading from somebody with integrity, they always leave satisfied, knowing that they've never dishonored their faith. But this reminds me, in Ireland, my mom would have her fair share of pastors and priests coming. Some of them would even be in their robes, coming for readings, because they also have private lives as well, where everything is not quite rosy. So they'll come, and there'll be beads of sweat and a bit of the trepidation. And she would just, in typical Irish fashion, just put them at their ease and say, look, love, what are you worried about? Your own Bible is filled with nothing but prediction. You have Noah, right, the prediction of God, Yahweh, predicting the flood and getting Noah all prepared for that. You have the prediction of the birth of Jesus Christ in Bethlehem. That was a prediction. You have Christ's own predictions, tons of predictions by Christ himself, especially the one concerning his betrayal, his crucifixion, the fact that he'll raise the temple again after 3 days. The entire book of Revelation is actually considered to be, the whole thing is a prophecy. So, once that was explained to them, they suddenly understand it. But there are certain prohibitions, absolutely. But normally people realize that they're not dishonoring their path. When you're getting insight into your own life, you can hardly be dishonoring your path.
Right. Now, what is divination? Can you go a little bit deeper into that, divination? Divination
is the age-old way of using the tarot cards or some external source to get a clearance on what's happening within. We live in an external world, and using the runes or using the I Ching, some of these things are very powerful, and they're based on number geometry and harmonies, and the mind likes them. The mind, especially with the tarot cards, are specifically developed to access certain parts of our consciousness, and divination is nothing more than that. So there will always be people that are skeptics. What would you like to speak to those people? Yeah, there are always people that are skeptics, and it's understandable that they are. In fact, I like to make people into critics of their environment. That's very important, that we become critics of our environment. And skeptics, it's understandable. Look at the charlatanism in this subject today. The TV psychics, what they're calling themselves psychics, are clearly, not people of integrity. This is proliferate in our world today. Do you believe that that's more future fortune telling instead of scientific? Yes, it is. I actually think of it as total rubbish, is actually what I think, because it's not accurate, and I know many people who've worked behind the scenes in that, and they've come forth to show that it's not really legitimate at all. It's misleading instead of supportive. Yeah. In a way, I'm glad that something's out there, better than nothing. Right. But at the same time, I work from a very moral standpoint of great integrity and great study. I've dedicated my whole life to this study, and I can't be associated with anyone who's profiteering from the disempowerment of other people. I take it very seriously. It's a religion with me. To the inveterate skeptic, I'll say what Mary Curie said. She said, "Nothing in life is to be feared, only to be understood." So Mary Curie, Anyway, the true skeptic, if you really look at the history of the word skeptic, it means someone who reserves judgment until they're conversant with the facts. Right? Somebody who reserves until they are familiar with the facts. But see, actually, when I sit down to people who first are skeptical about what I do, within 5 minutes, they already know their own star sign. Right. It's like this. Everyone is fascinated on a deep inner level with the archetypal mysteries. We have to face this, and you can no more abolish them, the mysteries, than you're going to say abolish your dreaming at night. And we know our star signs. We toss coins into wells for luck. We pick coins up. Right? This is all connected to the tarot. People know that there's a suit of coins and a suit of water. We play snakes and ladders, which is a very based on divination. It's connected to the Kundalini and mysticism. You play cards. You play roulette. The idea of a ball thrown into a roulette wheel is based on the zodiac, the spinning of the zodiac, and chance. Chess and I Ching share a lot in common. Hopscotch, the child's game, is based on the Kabbalistic tree of life. candles on a birthday cake is based on the zodiac, the years of your life. Even getting knighted by the queen, the swords, that's relating to the sword suit in the tarot. So all of these things are vestiges, relics of unconsciousness, relics of divination that are kept alive in our unconscious. And as people like Joseph Campbell rightly pointed out, it's part of the overall disempowerment of Western man that he has come to think of these things as nothing but pseudoscience or novelty.
It sounds like we're inundated with sacred symbolism,
everywhere.
But because we're not aware of it, we are not getting empowered by it. We're becoming disempowered instead.
Well, it's been fragmented, because of institutionalized belief systems and the fast-paced masculine mindset of the linear hemisphere. These things have sort of fallen by the wayside, and we need to get hold of them again and find out as the millennium comes, especially to its end, to get back to this, but do it in a scholarly and educated way. And coming back to the question of Christianity, you asked earlier about clients from that background. I like to always remind people that if you think about it, if you really face the facts, Christianity in its origin was an occult tradition. If you're into the occult tradition, then Christianity was occult.
And occult means hidden knowledge.
Christianity had to be hidden in its inception. It was revolutionary. It was dissenting. Its master was a dissenter. Right? It was opposed to the hegemony of the times, very virulently so. Okay, this is of course before it becomes orthodox. Early Christians had to use enigmatic and mystical symbols to communicate with one another. They had secret meetings, so and if one does their theological homework, it will be found that the tarot, with its 22 cards, is directly linked to the 22 letters of the Hebrew, Christian, and Celtic alphabets. And much work has actually been done on this, and so it's absolutely irrefutable. And if you do your homework, you will find that the Bible, as they say in theology, originates with the Torah. But if you do your homework, you'll find that the Torah originates with the tarot. In fact, Torah and tarot are the same words.
From Egypt, in other words.
Exactly, from Egypt. So there is a direct link back. Now, obviously, somebody's not going to think that the 78 cards of the deck are actually a treatise on theology, because they deal mostly in symbolism. But in fact, they are just that. And most of the religions of the world, especially Judeo-Christianity, is directly rooted in the science of the tarot.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Godfrey Higgins, who's a great scholar of the 19th century, Arthur Dyott Thompson, Robert Graves, the great mythologist who wrote the book The White Goddess, and many other pivotal works have been written to show that there is a deep connection between the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, then the 52 letters of the Sanskrit. There's 52 cards in a regular playing deck.
That's right.
You see, so, and these are magical languages. All magical languages had about 22 letters in them. So did the Celtic alphabet, which is a very mystical, druidic alphabet. So much work has been done on this, and in my classes I detail that a little bit more clearly about how that actually works.
And you refer to your work as archetypal taroscopic astrology, but also as Gnostic. What is that?
Yes. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but
it is a mouthful.
I had to come up with something that was unique to what I was doing, to really set it aside from other types of astrology, which I have a lot of problems with. But the Gnostic idea, Gnostics were the Western world's first depth psychologists or cognitive scientists, if you want to look at it that way. Cognitive therapists is probably a better word. And had they been allowed to be given a free voice, our Western world, would be entirely different than it is today. But unfortunately they were not. Now, in connection to divination, astrology, and tarot and so on, the Gnostic esoteric approach is, for instance, I say that the zodiac and the tarot is not something external. Okay, the Gnostic idea is that these things are not really external to us. We are living, walking, breathing zodiacs. And this takes some explaining, But Gnostics and occultists will recognize that the difference between occultism and Orthodox religion can be best explained this way. Orthodox religion believes that you get to the light by way of conversion. They never stop talking about conversion. You, a sinner, a person who has nothing, through somebody like us, will be converted to the truth. This has no meaning at all in any form of Gnosticism or occultism. In the occult idea, you are just being reawakened to the truth, which is a lot of difference than conversion. You already have it within you, and then you're at any point in your life, when you're ready. You are reawakened to the truth, but it exists within you first. You're not converted from nothingness into that.
Right. And Gnostic comes from the word gnosis,
Yes,
doesn't it? Which
it's
means
the Greek.
knowledge.
Yeah, it's the Coptic and Greek word for gnosis. It means knowledge, exactly. And the Gnostics were purged throughout the world, but they still exist. In fact, a lot of our movie makers, I'd go into this concept in the classes, but people in poetry, music, divination, arts, and even in movie business, I would actually term as Gnostics. People who look at the core rather than the peripheries of divisions of religions. They look into the core, the seed. And like I said, one of the premises is connecting to things like the zodiac, that it's not something external to us. We are a living, walking, breathing zodiac.
It's inside of us.
Right. And in fact, in my classes, we talk a lot about this living zodiac, this living oracle within us. I have my class is usually 5 or 6 in length, and we go into many sundry areas of metaphysics, but they are structured on 3 important themes. How does this living oracle come into existence? How does it operate? And then how do we get into personal contact with it? The tarot plays a big role in this, but those 3 themes are very important. And one other thing I'll say about the Gnostic approach to really practicalize it for people is that the Gnostics recognize 3 kinds of time. 2 we're familiar with, 1 we're not. The first kind of time is clock time, which is measured by, of course, a watch. Then there is seasonal time, which is measured by a calendar. And then there is a thing called psychological time. And it's not known, but psychological time is measured by the zodiac. That's what the zodiac is. It's a clock for measuring psychological time. And this is a concept that would have been familiar to philosophers like Henry Bergson, for instance, in the 19th century. Now the first 2 are well known to us, right? The clock time, seasonal time. In fact, we're veritable slaves to those. Nobody doubts the existence of those 2 types of time. But the lost truth is that the first 2 originated from the third, which is the reason why they have 12 divisions, 12 hours on the clock, 12 seasons in the year, and 12 signs of the zodiac. This is, they come from zodiological time. Now to adhere exclusively to the first 2 and to discard the third kind of time is sheer insanity, and is actually responsible for some of the disorder and disempowerment so prevalent in the world today. I mean, try living your life for just a week without a watch or a calendar. Just take it off and discard. It'd be impossible. You'd be in total disarray. Well, magnify that predicament to the soul level, and then you can understand why we're just afloat on the ocean of existence here, without a thread. Now, the almighty intelligence did not plan it to be that way. We chose it to be that way, and we need to make sure that we snap out of this.
What would you like to leave our audience with?
Well, the idea is that
about 30 seconds left.
Just that divination is not a game. The tarot is a very deep and powerful tool of empowerment.
When you go to the right person.
Yeah, especially when you go to the right person, and you need to bring it into your lives at some level. It's an enriching experience. It brings magic back into your life and into our world, and it helps you answer some of the predicaments and questions on all manners of your life, both physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
That's wonderful. And it's very empowering, and brings especially women back to the power of wisdom and the earth.
As we cross into the new millennium, we need to make a new spiritual commitment to ourselves. It's not just the changing of a clock. It's a new millennium, new spiritual commitment to ourselves. And that means sometimes revisiting things that our forefathers, our ancestors put down for our spiritual welfare. We need to get back in touch with that.
We need to honor the ones before us. So thank you again so much for watching Health Ahead, and thank you, Michael, for coming. It was wonderful.
Delight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.